So let's talk about what happened in Russia over the weekend, and because all of this is tied together, guys. Like you cannot separate what's going on in Russia from what's going on in China. You can't do any of that right now. It's all the same. So this weekend, Russia started warning that Ukraine was about to use a dirty nuclear bomb inside of Ukraine. And they would try to pretend that Russia did it. This was the argument, right? A false flag operation. A dirty bomb, of course, is an explosive device that basically disperses radioactive material once it's detonated. Yahoo News even confirmed it. Plenty of news organizations confirming this story. Journalist, though, John Mark Dugan, who first reported on this back on October 15th. Now, along with Russell Texas Bentley, they've been sounding the alarm on this story. Now, I watched it when he broke this story back in October, and he reported a few weeks ago that Russia had discovered a tactical nuclear device inside of Ukraine at the airport. Now, I want you to listen to Russell, okay, journalist, and who has some pretty interesting things to say from his sources on exactly what they found. Again, this was October 15th when this story first broke. Watch.
A lot of people don't know about. As you mentioned, we got some information from a reliable source, Spetsnaz, Radveshka, like intelligence guy, on the way up here about why the Gostomel Airport was one of the first targets in the beginning of the Operation Z that was taken over by the VDV. Apparently there was an airplane there.
Well, hold on, because most people don't actually know what that is. So when was this?
Okay, this was in the end of February of this year.
Okay.
The beginning of the Operation Z, when the Russians finally actually did come in. Of course, the war started 8 years ago, but the Russians were not in actual, military formations here until the beginning of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And one of their first targets that they took over was the Gostomel Airport.
Okay.
It was an airport that had military airplanes there, and one of them, we were told last night, had a dirty bomb, a nuclear weapon.
Mm-hmm.
It was on a plane called Miraz, which means dream in Ukrainian,
Mm-hmm.
and it was ready to go. That
Okay.
was one of the first things that the Russians took over to prevent the Ukrainians from using it.
Wow. So there it is. That was when we first learned about this. Now, unclear at this hour whether or not if it's the same one, because it sounds like it's a different one. Like they've tried it again, because the first one was under Russian control. They got control of it, and I didn't hear much about it. I didn't hear at the time Russia sounding the alarm to the International Atomic Energy Agency, but now they are today around this latest dirty bomb story. So to his credit, they were the only ones, John Mark Dugan and Russell Bentley, they were the only ones sounding the alarm on this story. And I was watching to see it develop, and boy, did it develop overnight. Russia now warning the world about what Ukraine is up to with this. Of course, the West is saying, no, this is just Russia lying. Of course, this has nothing to do with Ukraine. It's Russia doing this once again, just like how the Russians blew up their own Nord Stream pipeline, right? If you fall for that phony propaganda, then you're part of the problem. So here's Sergei Lavrov today on this new Ukrainian dirty bomb story. Watch.
У нас есть информация, конкретная информация относительно тех учреждений на Украине, тех научных институтов, которые обладают технологиями, позволяющими соорудить вот эту самую грязную бомбу. У нас есть информация, которую мы перепроверяли по соответствующим каналам, о том, что это не пустое подозрение, что здесь есть серьезные основания полагать, что подобные вещи могут планироваться. С некоторыми из своих собеседников Сергей Шойгу договорился о проведении дополнительных консультаций на эту тему на профессиональном уровне.
So to our non-Russian speaking audience, which is most of you, since we're waiting for the media reaction to this, and this is not some sort of phony suspicion, this is not reckless support, and this is this is again Russophobic actions. But the story being that, of course, they are, in fact, this is legitimate. This is real. And now we know this afternoon, Russia will send a letter to the United Nations Security Council and the Secretary General in connection with this provocation. And basically saying they've now invited the IAEA to come and investigate, according to Zero Hedge this afternoon. Here's Zero Hedge reporting. Following Russia's initial major weekend accusation that Ukraine is plotting a dirty bomb false flag incident, the Kremlin has announced it has readied all forces and capabilities to fulfill tasks in condition of radioactive contamination. This is according to a briefing that we just heard from. So this is happening. Yeah, and when someone earlier in the chat said how we hear about all these nuclear stories, we haven't really, what we've talked about before really is the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant.
Rhetoric. And there's been a lot of nuclear rhetoric from leaders as well as medical experts who are warning about what to do if this actually does leak into our food system, into our atmosphere. Yes, but now we're talking about an actual thing, a tangible thing to be worried about. Well, and the rhetoric is no longer hypothetical. So if you don't want to know about it, that's okay. Go about your day. Find a cooking show.
Well, it's like, remember freaking New York City launched that stupid ass infomercial that, here's what to do in case of a nuclear fallout in New York City. The first thing to do is to take off your flaming clothes in the middle of your apartment. Don't do it near a window. So if your clothes are on fire, just strip down naked and put them in the middle of your room and then turn on the news to see what's what. First of all, that's great. That's great advice, by the way. Just take off your burning radioactive clothing and put it in the middle of your room because the rest of your apartment will somehow be okay. On top of that, turn on the news. Like there's going to be any news to turn on, any radio stations to turn on.
Right.
And connect with.
Again, they're pointing out the media lack of interest in this, but our faith in the IAEA.
Yeah, IAEA.
I can never get this.
I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot about that part of it.
Our faith in them is pretty low at this point because they did go to Zaporizhia. They promised us a real investigation. All we really got was, that's dangerous and it should stop.
Well, and it was such a pile of garbage. They couldn't tell us which way. You couldn't tell us the azimuths of the attacks on the nuclear power plant.
Right. Mary Poppins could do better by just reading the wind at this point. So, okay, but Russia continues to ask for actual international community help, although this association was largely founded through summitry in the 70s around gas and oil. So, what do we expect?
So on Monday, the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, listen to this quote. It's really fascinating. He says, and he responded to critics who are saying, this is Russia doing this. This is Russia planting a dirty bomb. Okay, here's what Dmitry Peskov says from the Kremlin. He says, the fact that they do not trust the information which was provided by the Russian side does not mean that the threat of the use of such a dirty bomb ceases to exist. Right? It doesn't matter at this point. Like what we're saying is the West is agreeing it's there. Russia is agreeing it's there. So somebody do something about it. Like let's not explode a dirty nuclear bomb. So one thing we all agree on, regardless if you're, whatever, you're Slava Ukraine, you're, pro-Russia, you're pro-imperial Joe Biden, whatever you are, can we just take a step back and just think about how crazy this is for a moment? And who's the cooler head that's going to prevail in this situation?
Right, because again, Russia has not stepped away from the peace agreement offerings. They continue to say, we can stop this at any time. It's the West that continues to say that any measure of peace talk is now illegal, apparently, because Zelensky signed legislation that says peace talks are now illegal, which means we are down to the very last man.
Well, and they're also, and the awareness about bringing this to the attention, I think it's a smart move. What they're saying is, we see a false flag that's about to unfold. We're telling you, here it is. IAEA, go look at it. We're telling you where it is. Because they don't want to be on the other side of what happened with the Nord Stream pipeline, where you have these morons on CNN. They're like, clearly it was Russians, were the ones that blew up their own pipeline.
Right. Yes. And, experts in Finland are saying, we don't really feel like we need to release to the public what we know, and we're going to just stop right here.
About the pipeline.
Yeah. We're not interested.
We found some things. We don't think you need to know about it.
It's interesting.
We found a 50-meter wide hole, and we found out how it was caused, but we don't need to release that information.
It's top secret.
Move along. Do you remember when President Biden said this about sending troops into Ukraine?
And to fight in Ukraine.
Sorry, I keep forgetting I hit the mute button earlier, and I forgot that. Can we re-rack that, Philip? Sorry.
While I will not send American servicemen to fight in Ukraine.
Okay, so I will not send American servicemen to fight in Ukraine. Well, we now know that that's total garbage. We've known that for months, and now we have official word on that. U.S. is now admitting that the U.S. Army is fighting Russia in Ukraine and is now mounting forces to take on an attack. Specifically, no votes from Congress, no declaration of war on this. The 101st Airborne Division, from Kyle Anzalone, writes, the 101st Airborne Division deployed to Ukraine's border is ready to fight tonight. The White House has deployed thousands of American soldiers just miles from Ukraine to prepare for war, according to CBS News. Officers speaking with the outlet revealed that they were there for combat against Russia. Brigadier General John Lubis confirmed nearly 5,000 troops from the 101st Airborne Division recently joined the 100,000 American soldiers already deployed to Europe.
But those soldiers, this is a disservice to them that Congress won't officially declare war because they won't get the benefits that soldiers who served in active combat receive because you are more taken care of as a military member if you are in a declared war. So we don't do them. Do we care about their lives? I do, but I don't think Congress does because it won't even give them the courtesy of calling what they're going into a war.
So now CBS News. So CBS News, anytime you have like embedded reporters hanging out with soldiers, it's always a problem. Like we saw this in the Gulf War, right? When you have an embedded, we covered this on our propaganda story that we did a week ago here on the show. When you have embedded reporters who are in the tank with a certain group,
yes,
of course they're then protected by that group, right? That group is protecting them, and they're telling them, we're gonna protect you in the field, so you're basically providing favorable coverage. Then,
yes,
is what happens in this situation. So here is CBS News embedded with the 101st Airborne Division in a report that aired this weekend. It's jaw-dropping. Watch.
They're America's go-to combat troops. Go, 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 go. The soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division, now the closest U.S. forces to the fight in Ukraine. We joined Colonel Edwin Mathadas and Brigadier General John Lubis on board a Black Hawk helicopter where we flew along the coast of the Black Sea, across those same waters from Russian-held territory in Ukraine, including Crimea.
What is the what-if? What are you preparing for? We got two major tasks, right? To assure our allies and deter our adversaries from doing anything.
Fully aware those adversaries have eyes on everything this close.
That part of it? That's the tire part of it. That's the whole deter aspect, right? They know that we're here. They know that we're ready. We're just coming within 3.5 miles of the Ukrainian border. In fact, that city behind us is in Ukraine. We're right on the edge of NATO territory.
We reach a forward operating site to watch forces of the 101st Screaming Eagles in joint exercises with Romanian troops. Tanks, artillery, open fire with live rounds. A drill designed to replicate the exact battle conditions in Ukraine. Roughly 4,700 soldiers of the 101st have been sent from Fort Campbell, Kentucky to reinforce NATO's eastern flank.
To hear that. So we're reinforcing NATO forces because Ukraine's forces, of course, are all but destroyed. Their entire air force is gone. I mean, so as we've reported multiple times on this show, through journalists and through military analysts who understand what's going on the ground there, their forces are pretty much decimated. And so to use any of the heavy equipment, any of the heavy armor, has to be NATO forces. That's what's going on. Or training for any Ukrainians that are going to Germany, they're going into England to get the training and coming back. But for the most part now, it's NATO soldiers. And we've been lied to.
Well, now.
Hey, David.
I was going to say now, now they're going to be able to, if a U.S. soldier gets hurt somehow on the border, they're going to say, oh, they attacked a U.S. soldier. Now it's full on. They'll be able to get people to back it up then. It's like, oh, now we're in a full-on war.
Yeah. Well, okay, well, then what were you doing on our doorstep anyway? And you're running all sorts of tactical. Fine. So this is the 101st Airborne Division. This is no pushover division. If you ever read Stephen Ambrose's great book about Band of Brothers, they later made it into an HBO miniseries, The Band of Brothers. But I mean, the last time that they were in Europe is on D-Day, and then of course at the Battle of the Bulge. So we have to go back to World War II for the deployment of the 101st Airborne Division in Europe. Now we're just like openly telling it like it is. Now we're just saying it. We're not even trying to hide it anymore. No, it's NATO fully engaged with Russia, fully engaged. So make no bones about it. But we're going to continue to send them money because you remember how last week we were talking how Republicans said, well, there was a group within the Republican Party that's saying, hey, if we win on November 8th, we're gonna pull back the aid to Ukraine. We're gonna pull back on all of this endless spending.
It was Kevin McCarthy. Yes.
Yeah. And so, but then he got sat on by Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell came out unequivocally. He's like, we stand with Ukraine. I think it was all a show because both parties now over the weekend are now aiming to roll out another $50 billion package. And it was almost like they did it on purpose. Like they floated this idea of we're going to pull back on aid. And now it's under the guise of, hey, we're going to roll out as much money as we possibly can as quickly as possible because we want to get it done before the election day. $50 billion to Ukraine with military assistance that we don't know where these weapons are going. We don't know where the assistance is going. We don't know where the money is going.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey Sachs was asked about, he did a panel over the weekend. I want to play this because I think this sums it up perfectly. He was asked about American imperialism. He was asked about aggression throughout the world. And he was on a panel, and I want you to listen to the moderator. Well, once Jeffrey Sachs starts to tell the truth about American aggression, American imperialism, he gets cut off. And we later learned that the guy that cuts him off is a guy who is the governor of the Ditchley Foundation, which is funded by John Sawyer's former head of MI6. So when he starts telling the truth about the United States, he gets cut off by an intelligence state operative. Listen to this amazing return.
The most violent country in the world in the 19th century, by far, was perhaps the most democratic or second most democratic, and that was Britain. You can be democratic at home and ruthlessly imperial abroad. The most violent country in the world since 1950 has been the United States. It's been by far involved
Jeffrey,
in more,
stop
wait a
now.
minute, in more
Let's
wars.
Jeffrey, I'm Jeffrey, I'm your moderator, and it's enough.
Okay, I'm done.
Jeffrey, I'm your moderator. Please stop telling the truth. Once he starts telling that the United States is the bloodiest, is the most violent regime in the world, he gets cut off by a former, a deep state intelligence operative. Just unbelievable.
I mean, what was objectionable about that for him to make those let him defend the point?
Right. So, Jeffrey, can you explain? Yeah. How about this? Let's talk about Yemen. Let's talk about Syria. Let's talk about Ethiopia.
Which we're going to in a minute.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Ethiopia in a second. How many other places we want to talk about? Afghanistan or Iraq, or how many other countries do Western imperial powers need to destroy before we have a conversation? You're allowed to talk about it on a panel like that.